cold billionaire CEO ignores all women, then falls in love with Housekeeper'S kind daughter. He had everything, money, power, and a heart made of ice, until the Housekeeper'S quiet daughter walked in and melted what no one else could touch. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful story family. Before we begin, I would be glad to know that these lessons get to people in different parts of the world, so please let me know where you're watching from. And thank you so much for being part of this growing story family. You matter here, truly. Let us begin. The city's skyline glittered with towering glass and steel, but within one of those gleaming skyscrapers, Marcello Cannon's office sat untouched by warmth. The billionaire CEO was a man known as much for his fortune as for the frost that clung to his reputation. Whispers echoed through boardrooms and social circles. Marcello was cold, distant, untouchable. Women sought his attention, drawn by his power and mystery, yet none ever penetrated the shield he wore so naturally. They called him a man who built walls higher than his empire. Marcello moved through his world like a shadow cast by the city's neon lights, commanding, unyielding, and always a step removed. His days were filled with sharp decisions and sharp suits, meetings where he ruled with an iron will and a gaze that never softened. Invitations to gala events, charity balls, and exclusive parties lined his calendar, but Marcello attended only out of obligation. The women who approached wore smiles that didn't reach their eyes, hoping to catch a glimpse of something more behind his steel-gray stare. None succeeded. The truth was simple. Marcello had long ago closed off his heart. Years of loss and betrayal had taught him to trust only in himself, and even then, cautiously. For him, the world was a transaction, relationships an exchange. Sentiment was a liability. And so, in his towering penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of success, Marcello remained alone. Far from the glittering heights of Marcello's life, in a modest neighborhood marked by worn sidewalks and flowering window boxes, lived Ayla Moody. She was the daughter of the housekeeper who cared for the Cannon estate, a girl whose world was measured not by luxury, but by kindness and resilience. Ayla moved through her days with an easy grace, her laughter soft but genuine. She carried no airs, only a steady warmth that brightened the humblest of rooms. Helping her mother with chores, caring for her younger siblings, and dreaming quietly of a future where she might do something meaningful, Ayla's life was a world apart from Marcello's. Yet, despite their differences, Ayla knew the power of simple acts. A shared meal, a patient ear, a helping hand. Her kindness wasn't taught in any school or boardroom. It grew from the soil of everyday struggles and small joys. And while Marcello's world glittered on high, hers blossomed quietly in the shade. Their lives were on separate paths, two worlds that rarely crossed, each shaped by very different truths. Marcello's life was forged in solitude and control, Ayla's in community and care. The question lingered. What happens when two such worlds, seemingly impossible to unite, meet? As the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting the city in gold and shadow, that question hung in the air like a silent promise. What happens when cold meets warmth, power meets humility, distance meets kindness? What happens when Marcello Cannon, the man who had shut himself away from love, crosses paths with Ayla Moody, a girl whose heart was open and unguarded? Their story was about to begin, and with it, a journey neither of them could foresee. Before we step into their world, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced kindness from someone you never expected it from? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the smallest gestures leave the deepest marks, and so the stage is set, the cold empire, the warm heart, two lives waiting to collide. What unfolds next might just change everything. Marcello Cannon's rise to power was a story etched in grit and relentless determination. Orphaned at a young age, Marcello grew up in a world where trust was a luxury he could not afford. The early years of his life were a series of survival lessons, lessons that taught him the cold reality of the world. With no family to lean on, no safety net beneath his feet, Marcelo learned to stand alone and to build a fortress around his heart. From the very beginning, Marcelo's mind was sharp, his focus unyielding. He had an instinct for business that set him apart, a rare talent for seeing opportunity where others saw only risk. By his early 20s, he had already launched his first company, and from there his empire grew. Piece by piece, acquisition by acquisition. The name Cannon became synonymous with power and success, whispered in the halls of boardrooms, printed on the pages of financial journals. Yet, beneath the glittering surface of wealth and influence, Marcelo carried the weight of solitude. The walls he built were not just for his protection in business, they encased a man wary of letting anyone close. Emotional vulnerability was a threat he refused to entertain. Marcelo's reputation for ruthlessness in the boardroom was well earned. He negotiated with precision, never allowing sentiment to cloud his judgment. Colleagues admired and feared him in equal measure. He made decisions swiftly and without hesitation, cutting ties and deals with the same ease. To Marcelo, business was a battlefield, and victory required discipline and detachment. Outside the sharp suits and steel conferences, Marcelo's personal life was a guarded silence. Women who tried to break through found themselves met with polite but unyielding distance. Flirting invitations were deflected with practiced ease. Conversations steered clear of anything too intimate. For Marcelo, relationships had become transactions, calculated and controlled, or simply distractions to be avoided. There was a pattern repeated countless times, promising beginnings that ended quietly, almost invisibly, in rejection. A dinner here, a glance there, each encounter dissolving when emotions threatened to take root. Marcelo never spoke openly about his reasons, but those closest to him sensed the cause lay buried in his past, a history of loss and betrayal that left scars invisible to the world, but raw beneath his skin. One such evening stood out, though Marcelo would never admit it. At a gala thrown by a prominent charity, a woman named Lillian had dared to look beyond his fortress. She laughed with genuine warmth and spoke with a kindness that unsettled him. For a brief moment, Marcelo allowed himself to imagine something different, a connection that might soften the edges of his life. But when she reached out, he recoiled. The years of self-protection surged to the surface, and he withdrew, cold and distant as ever. The moment passed, leaving Marcelo alone once more, the loneliness settling like a familiar shadow. In rare, quiet moments, when the city lights outside his penthouse dimmed and the noise of the world faded, Marcelo's loneliness crept in. The power he wielded felt hollow against the emptiness he carried. He was a man who controlled everything except the ache inside. These moments were fleeting, pushed away by work and routine. Marcelo believed strength was found in control, and so he clung to it fiercely. Intimacy was a risk too great, vulnerability, a weakness he could not afford. And yet, beneath the cold exterior, a part of Marcelo yearned for something more, a part that had long been buried but not entirely extinguished. His life was a carefully maintained order, a kingdom built on power and distance. But every fortress has its cracks, and Marcelo's were beginning to show. The arrival of kindness, unexpected and gentle, would soon challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and the world. The question was not if Marcelo would change, but whether he was ready to let go of the walls he had built for so long. Because sometimes even the coldest hearts can begin to thaw. Isla Moody's mornings began before the sun rose, in the soft hush of dawn that blanketed the sleepy town she called home. Her world was far removed from the gleaming skyscrapers and boardrooms that defined Marcelo Cannon's life. Instead, it was shaped by the steady rhythm of family, duty, and quiet hope. Living with her mother, Grace, in a modest house near the edge of the city, Ila's days were filled with responsibilities that she embraced willingly. Grace, a devoted housekeeper working in the expansive Cannon estate, carried the burdens of long hours and hard labor. Isla, her daughter, was her constant companion and unwavering support. Together, they faced life's challenges with resilience and grace. Despite the financial hardships, the Moody household overflowed with warmth. Laughter echoed through the small rooms, and love was the foundation that held everything together. Isla's heart was as generous as the space was small, and she carried kindness with her like a treasured gift, always ready to offer to those around her, no matter how little she had to give. At the Cannon estate, where marble floors gleamed and chandeliers sparkled, Isla moved with quiet purpose. Her presence was unassuming, yet it left a subtle mark on the lives she touched. From greeting the staff with genuine smiles to quietly tidying a forgotten bouquet or softening a harsh word with gentle understanding, Isla's kindness rippled through the grand halls. She didn't crave recognition. Her actions came from a place deeper than ambition. It was her nature to care, to nurture, to find light in places others overlooked. Whether it was comforting a nervous new employee or bringing a steaming cup of tea to a weary gardener, Isla's empathy was her quiet strength. Her dreams, too, reflected a spirit unbound by circumstance. While the world often judged her by the limits of her social status, Isla envisioned a future where she could make a difference beyond her immediate world. She longed to study music, to create melodies that could lift spirits and heal wounds. More than anything, she wished to be a voice for those who, like her mother, worked tirelessly but were rarely seen. In the contrast between her warmth and Marcello's icy distance, the story of two worlds began to take shape. Where Marcello's life was ruled by control and detachment, Isla's was guided by connection and hope. The vast divide between them was a chasm not just of wealth, but of heart. Yet, beneath the surface, fate was quietly weaving threads that would bring these two lives closer than either could have imagined. What happens when kindness from the most unexpected source begins to challenge a fortress built on years of solitude and pain? At this moment, the story invites you to reflect. Have you ever experienced a simple act of kindness that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes it's those small gestures that leave the deepest impact. The rain came suddenly, a fierce downpour that swept across the city streets like a wild force no one could control. Marcello Cannon's sleek black car cut through the storm, its engine humming steadily as he made his way to an important meeting. The rhythmic tap of rain against the windshield was a familiar sound, one that usually offered a kind of solace amid his relentless schedule. But then, without warning, the engine sputtered and coughed before falling silent. Marcello's hand gripped the steering wheel as he cursed under his breath. The car had died. He pulled over to the side of the slick road, the rain immediately soaking him as he stepped out. Marcello was no stranger to challenges, but this was an inconvenience he hadn't anticipated, and one that demanded a level of patience he rarely indulged. With the storm showing no signs of easing, he scanned the street for help, the city around him a blur of umbrellas and hurried footsteps. That's when he saw her. Ayla Moody, walking briskly under the shelter of a battered umbrella, paused as she noticed the stranded vehicle. She approached without hesitation, her expression calm and kind, despite the rain pelting her face. "Need some help?" she called out, her voice steady. Marcello studied her for a moment, the simple practicality of her coat, the determined set of her jaw, the warmth in her eyes. She wasn't like anyone he'd met before. Usually, women approached him with calculated smiles or veiled intentions. Ayla's offer was genuine, free of pretense. "Sure," he said, his tone clipped but not unkind. "If you know what you're doing." She nodded, kneeling beside the car to examine the engine. Marcelo watched her hands move with quiet confidence, turning a wrench here, tightening a bolt there. She worked efficiently, unfazed by the rain that drenched her. "What's your name?" Marcelo asked, breaking the silence. "Isla," she replied without looking up. "And you're not exactly dressed for a roadside mechanic." He let out a humorless chuckle. "Marcelo Cannon." Her eyes flicked up, curiosity piqued but tempered by respect. "That name sounds familiar." "Business?" He nodded, feeling the familiar weight of his reputation settle around him like armor. "Yes, I run Cannon Enterprises." Ayla smiled softly. "Must be demanding. You don't look like the kind to ask for help." His gaze sharpened. "I prefer to be in control." She glanced at him, sensing the tension beneath the surface. "Sometimes control isn't the answer." Marcelo's heart beat faster, a sensation he hadn't felt in years, a crack in his carefully constructed facade. He wanted to brush it aside, deny its existence, but it lingered stubbornly. "How long will this take?" he asked, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Not long," she assured him, "just a loose connection. You're lucky it happened here." As she worked, they talked. Their words revealed worlds apart, her humble roots, his towering empire, but also a shared understanding of struggle and perseverance. Marcelo found himself drawn to her resilience, her unspoken kindness, and the ease with which she moved through the world. When the engine roared back to life, he felt a reluctant gratitude. "Thank you, Isla. I'm not used to this." "Maybe it's time to get used to it," she said with a knowing smile. He climbed back into the car, the rain easing into a soft drizzle. As Marcelo drove away, his mind was unsettled by thoughts of the woman who had just appeared, and the unexpected warmth she had ignited. What happens when a man built on walls and control meets a woman who offers a glimpse of something real? The answer lies ahead, as two very different lives begin to intertwine in ways neither could have predicted. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever helped a stranger during a difficult moment? Share your story in the comments below. It's often in those moments that unexpected connections are born. The days that followed Marcelo Cannon's rainy encounter with Isla Moody were filled with a quiet but undeniable shift. In the sprawling halls of Cannon Enterprises' estate, where polished surfaces gleamed under crystal chandeliers and conversations often hovered on the edge of pretense, Marcelo found himself increasingly aware of one presence that felt remarkably genuine. It began with small, almost accidental moments. Isla, moving quietly yet confidently through the grand house, carried with her a kindness that seemed untouched by the wealth and power surrounding her. Whether tending to a wilting plant or offering a warm smile to a harried staff member, she radiated a sincerity that cut through the usual gloss of luxury. Marcelo, ever the observer, noticed these subtleties. In boardrooms filled with stiff smiles and empty flattery, his attention would drift to Isla, who never sought the spotlight but held it nonetheless. He caught himself wondering about her thoughts, the stories behind her calm demeanor. One afternoon, Marcelo found himself alone in the vast library, a sanctuary of quiet amidst the storm of business deals and expectations. To his surprise, Ayla appeared there, carefully dusting shelves with a delicate focus. She looked up, startled to see him. "Mr. Cannon," she said softly, closing the book she had been cleaning. "I didn't realize anyone was here." "Neither did I," Marcelo replied, his tone softer than usual. They talked briefly, about books, about the quiet beauty of knowledge, about moments when life's simplicity offered more comfort than any luxury. Marcelo listened, drawn to the thoughtful way Isla spoke of her childhood, her dreams, and the resilience that had shaped her. As days turned to weeks, these encounters became a steady rhythm. At formal social events where laughter felt forced and conversation skimmed the surface, Marcello's heart remained distant. The endless stream of glamorous women, all vying for his attention, only deepened his sense of isolation. They saw the billionaire, the powerful CEO, but never the man beneath. Yet with Isla, the dynamic was different. There was no pretense, no agenda, only an honest exchange that stirred something unfamiliar and fragile within Marcello. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of fading gold, Marcello found himself standing beside Ayla in the estate's garden. The scent of blooming jasmine mingled with the crisp air. "You seem different from everyone else here," Marcello said quietly. Ayla smiled, a touch of sadness in her eyes. "Maybe because I'm not trying to be anything I'm not." He studied her, realizing that in her authenticity lay a strength he had long forgotten. Marcello, the man who built walls to keep others out, felt those barriers begin to crumble, brick by brick. Meanwhile, Ayla remained unaware of the depth of Marcello's growing feelings. She saw a man often burdened by invisible weight, a man who watched the world with guarded eyes. Yet she sensed something new, a softness in his gaze when it met hers, a vulnerability he tried to conceal. Their connection deepened not through grand gestures, but in the quiet understanding that passed between them. A shared glance, a gentle laugh, a moment of silence filled with meaning. Marcello's world, once defined by control and solitude, was shifting. He found himself seeking Ayla's presence, craving the warmth she brought into his cold existence. The strength of her kindness challenged him to face his own vulnerabilities and question the walls he had so carefully constructed. What does it mean to truly see someone beneath the surface? To recognize the essence of a person beyond appearances and expectations? Now, I invite you to think about the moments in your own life when you glimpse the true character of someone, when a simple interaction revealed depths you hadn't expected. Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes it's in these quiet moments that we find the most profound connections. The turning point came quietly, without fanfare, in the soft glow of an autumn evening. The estate, usually alive with business and obligation, had grown still. Marcello Cannon, the unyielding titan of industry, found himself sitting beside Ayla Moody on a weathered bench beneath the boughs of an ancient oak tree. The day's tension had melted away, leaving space for something neither of them fully understood yet. For years, Marcello had worn his walls like armor, impenetrable and cold. His past was a landscape marked by loss and abandonment, a childhood stripped of the comfort many take for granted. Orphaned early, he had built his empire not just with ambition, but with a fierce determination to never again feel powerless. Control was his sanctuary. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. But that evening, with Ayla's calm presence beside him, those carefully constructed barriers began to tremble. "I've never told anyone this," Marcello confessed, voice low and hesitant. "But when I was a child, I learned that relying on others meant vulnerability and pain." He glanced at Ayla, searching her face for judgment or pity, but found only quiet understanding. Encouraged by her steady gaze, he continued, "I was left alone more times than I can count. No one came back for me. I promised myself I'd never be weak like that again." Ayla reached out, her hand resting gently over his. "You were a child, Marcello. It wasn't your fault." Her words carried a kindness that pierced his defenses. For the first time, he allowed himself to be seen, not as a powerful CEO, but as a man shaped by his scars. "What if you're not supposed to be perfect?" Ayla asked softly. "What if trusting someone means finding strength in imperfection?" Marcello's breath caught. The concept was foreign, almost frightening. Yet, in that moment, he glimpsed a possibility, a life beyond control, beyond fear. Ayla's presence was a steady beacon. She had never known the opulence of his world, yet she offered something priceless: empathy. Her kindness wasn't transactional or calculated, it was pure and unwavering. Slowly, Marcelo began to lower his guard. He shared stories of his childhood struggles, the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow, the moments when hope felt like a distant star. In return, Isla spoke of her own challenges, growing up with limited means, the responsibility she bore for her family, and the dreams she nurtured despite the odds. Their conversations became a delicate dance of vulnerability and strength. Marcelo, once a fortress of solitude, found solace in Aila's company, and Aila discovered in Marcelo a man capable of tenderness beneath his stoic exterior. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcelo admitted his fear, not of failure or loss, but of allowing himself to hope again. "I'm afraid to let someone in," he said, voice trembling with honesty. "What if I lose everything I've fought for?" Isla squeezed his hand gently. "Then you found something worth fighting for, a chance at happiness." Their relationship, once defined by curiosity, shifted into tentative affection. Each glance, each touch, carried the weight of newfound trust. Marcelo's heart, long guarded, began to beat with the rhythm of hope. In this fragile space between past pain and future possibility, Marcelo and Isla discovered the power of breaking barriers, of embracing imperfection and choosing to trust again. As their bond deepened, so did the lesson that true strength lies not in control, but in the courage to be vulnerable. What about you? Have you ever found the courage to let down your walls and trust someone with your truth? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes, opening up is the bravest thing we can do, and the most transformative. The quiet moments between Marcelo and Isla had blossomed into something fragile but real, something neither dared name aloud just yet. Beneath the surface, however, a tempest was gathering, fueled by fears and insecurities, both shared, but neither fully understood. Marcelo sat alone in his expansive office, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Despite the glittering skyline, his mind was clouded by a storm far less visible, a battle raging inside him. Years of solitude had etched deep grooves of doubt and guilt into his heart. He had built a fortress around himself, and now, as cracks appeared, the weight of vulnerability pressed down with an unbearable heaviness. Who am I to deserve her, he wondered. Too broken, too old, too haunted by mistakes. The image of Isla's warm smile haunted him, not because it comforted, but because it unsettled. Could someone like her truly see past his scars? Was her kindness genuine, or was it just pity disguised as affection? On the other side of the divide, Ayla grappled with her own doubts. In the modest home she shared with her mother, the questions spun endlessly in her mind. Marcelo Cannon, the untouchable, the cold titan of industry, had shown her a tenderness she never expected. Yet, beneath the glow of those rare smiles, she wondered if his feelings were real or merely a passing courtesy. Was she just a momentary escape from his loneliness, or did he truly see her for who she was? Their worlds could not have been more different. Marcelo's social circle sparkled with wealth and privilege, where status was everything and judgment was swift. Whispers followed their growing closeness, quiet remarks disguised as concern. "Is she out of his league?" they murmured. "What does she want from him?" Isla felt the weight of those whispers, the silent disapproval that seeped through every glance from the staff and visitors at the estate. It wasn't just about love. It was about class, history, and unspoken rules that neither she nor Marcelo could easily ignore. The pressure mounted, tightening around Marcelo like a noose. His instincts screamed to pull away, to protect himself from the vulnerability threatening to unravel him. So he distanced himself, retreating into the cold walls that had kept him safe for so long. Their conversations grew shorter, their shared moments fewer. Marcelo's silences were heavy with unspoken fears, while Isla's heart ached with confusion and hurt. One afternoon, as the autumn wind rattled the windows, Isla found Marcelo standing alone in the vast library, eyes fixed on the rows of books, but seeing nothing. "Marcelo," she said softly, stepping closer, "why are you shutting me out?" He turned, the mask of control slipping just enough to reveal the turmoil beneath. "I'm scared, Ayla," he admitted. "Scared that I'll hurt you, that I'm not enough." Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "You're not broken. You're human. And love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to be with someone, flaws and all." Her words touched a place Marcelo thought had long been dead, yet fear still clenched his heart. "I don't want to lose control," he whispered. "I don't want to be vulnerable." "Sometimes," Isla said, "letting go of control is the bravest thing you can do." The tension between them was a mirror of a universal truth, how self-doubt and fear can threaten even the strongest bonds. Their struggle was raw, unpolished, and deeply relatable. It was the fight many face when love challenges the walls they've built to survive. As viewers watch Marcelo and Isla wrestle with their fears and social divides, they are invited to reflect on their own battles with self-doubt. Have you ever questioned your worthiness of love? Faced the fear of being vulnerable with someone who matters? Share your story in the comments. Let's talk about overcoming the walls we build around our hearts, because sometimes the greatest love stories begin not when everything is perfect, but when two imperfect people choose to face their fears together. The storm had passed, but it hadn't left untouched ground. Marcelo and Isla stood on quieter terrain now, changed by the tension that had pulled them apart and the unspoken longing that had drawn them back together. In the quiet hum of early morning, the estate's garden shimmered with dew. Marcelo watched from a distance as Isla helped the gardener lift a sagging trellis, her palms muddied, her laugh unguarded. There was something grounding in the way she gave herself to the present. She moved without pretense, acted without calculation. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, least of all him. And that, precisely, is what impressed him most. He was no longer confused by what pulled him toward her, but that clarity brought a new kind of discomfort. Accountability. Marcelo had spent most of his life in control, of people, of outcomes, of risk. He didn't know how to hold space for someone without trying to solve, protect, or possess. That night, as autumn air crept through the cracks of the estate, Isla knocked on his study door. Not timidly, not boldly, but with a steadiness that was all her own. Marcelo glanced up from the desk but didn't speak. "I need to say something," she said, stepping inside. He gestured to the seat across from him, but she remained standing. "You didn't save me," she said, her voice low and clear. "You gave me the tools to save myself." The words didn't land as accusation. They landed as truth. Marcelo's brow furrowed. "I never claimed to save you." "No," Isla said, "but I think a part of you wanted to, and maybe a part of me wanted to be saved, until I realized that wasn't what this was. You showed me my own strength by not fixing everything for me, and I need you to know, if we're going to be anything to each other, I don't want to be someone you protect from the world. I want to be someone you stand beside in it." Silence stretched between them. Marcelo leaned back, feeling something old and rigid inside him loosen. He had never loved like that. He had given gifts, solved problems, built walls of luxury and silence around people he cared about, offering them comfort always, but never himself. Isla wasn't asking for protection. She was asking for presence. For the first time in years, Marcelo felt small and free. He was no longer the man commanding boardrooms and intimidating entire industries. He was just a man, tired of being alone. He stood, crossed the room slowly. "I don't know how to do this," he confessed, "but I want to try, with you." That was the turning point, not a grand declaration, not a sweeping gesture, but a quiet agreement between two people choosing growth, together. From that moment, they began to rewrite their dynamic, not with speeches or sudden change, but with daily choices. Shared breakfasts on the terrace, evening walks through the gardens, the occasional disagreement handled not with withdrawal but conversation. Marcelo found himself listening more, not just to Ila's words but to her silences, what they carried, what they withheld. He discovered that love didn't live in the dramatic moments, but in the mundane, passing the sugar without asking, remembering her favorite tea, pausing mid-meeting just to check if she'd eaten. He began sharing, too, not all at once, but in pieces. Stories about his childhood, what little of it he could remember. The sting of betrayal when early business partners had stolen from him. The guilt of building walls so high he couldn't recognize his own reflection. Isla, in turn, shared dreams she'd buried for the sake of responsibility. Her quiet desire to open a community arts center. Her fear of being dismissed for dreaming too big from a place so small. They didn't promise each other perfection. They didn't even promise forever. But they offered presence, effort, honesty. And through it all, the affection that had lingered beneath their every exchange found shape. Glances held a second too long, fingers brushed and lingered, words softened at the edges. One evening, under the soft glow of twilight, Marcelo invited Isla to the rooftop, the one place in the estate where he went when the world pressed in too close. The city was quiet below them. The air smelled of jasmine and distant rain. "I never brought anyone up here before," he said. "I can see why. It's peaceful." Marcelo looked at her, not the way a man surveys beauty, but the way a soul recognizes its counterpart. "I never let myself believe peace was something I could have." "You don't need to earn it," she whispered. "You just have to stop running from it." That was the moment. No orchestrated confession, no sweeping background music, just stillness. Marcelo leaned in slowly, pausing just enough to give her the choice. Isla met him halfway, lips brushing in a kiss that felt less like fireworks and more like breath, needed, quiet, anchoring. Their first kiss wasn't a beginning, it was a recognition of battles fought alone, of wounds still healing, of the possibility of something lasting not in spite of their brokenness, but because of how they'd grown through it. In that single touch they honored what had come before, pain, doubt, distance, and made room for what was yet to come. Not perfection, but partnership. Their bond wasn't born of rescue, it was rooted in mutual growth. Marcelo no longer saw love as something to buy, win, or guard. He saw it as something to nurture. Isla no longer feared being overlooked. She had claimed her own worth. Together they stood not as opposites, but as complements, each carrying light and shadow, strength and softness. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. Autumn arrived with golden leaves and sharp winds. The estate shimmered with change, its corners no longer echoing loneliness, but humming softly with new life. Isla and Marcelo, though cautious, had found a rhythm. Laughter wasn't rare now. Neither were quiet evenings filled with shared stories and unspoken glances. But peace has a way of inviting ghosts. It began with a letter. Isla found it tucked between the pages of a gardening journal in the estate's library. There was no return address. Just her name, written in a hand she hadn't seen in years, tight, slanted, almost violent. The message inside was short. "You thought moving to pretty places would hide you, but I remember. I always remember. Tell your mother I said hello." Isla's fingers trembled. Her breath caught. She didn't scream. She folded the letter, slipped it into her coat pocket, and walked to her mother's cottage in silence. Marcello found out that evening, not because she told him, but because he noticed. Her posture was stiff, her voice distant. She avoided his eyes the way one avoids mirrors when they're afraid of what they might see. He waited until they were alone in the study, firelight flickering against the windows. "Isla," he said gently. "What happened?" She placed the letter in his hands without a word. As Marcello read, something cold tightened in his chest, the kind of cold he hadn't felt since the days of bodyguards, business enemies, and betrayal. But this was different. This wasn't about money or power. This was about her, about danger reaching into their present from a darkness she had tried to bury. Isla's mother confirmed it that night. The letter came from Raymond Glint, the man who had tormented her in a past life, long before she escaped, long before she rebuilt herself and her daughter. She thought he had vanished. She had hoped he was dead. But some shadows don't fade. They wait. "I'll handle it," Marcello said the next morning, steel in his voice. Isla shook her head. "You can't solve this the way you're used to." "You think I'm going to let this man threaten you?" he asked, rising. "I think we have to face him, not hide from him." Her tone stopped him cold. This wasn't fear speaking, it was resolve. She wasn't a frightened girl anymore. She was a woman standing beside him, not behind him. Marcello had always protected those he cared about by controlling every angle. But this time Isla wouldn't let him do it alone, and that terrified him more than anything. Still, he listened. They contacted a local investigator, secured protection for Isla's mother, and began documenting everything. Marcello offered to relocate them until things calmed down. Isla refused. "I've spent too much of my life running," she said. "I'm not running anymore." Tension lingered in the days that followed, not between them, but around them. Every knock at the door, every unknown number, every shadow at dusk. Isla stayed alert, but not paralyzed. Marcello was ready to do whatever it took, legally or not, to make the threat disappear. Then, one night, it came to a head. Marcello had stepped out for a business call. Isla was alone in the cottage organizing art supplies when she heard the back door creak open. The wind had been fierce all day. She brushed it off until footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. She turned, and there he was. Older, leaner, more desperate, but unmistakably Raymond Glint. His eyes held the same sick familiarity she remembered from her childhood, the way he smiled like it was a game, like he still held power. "You look just like her," he said. Isla didn't flinch. Her fingers curled around a ceramic vase. "You need to leave. I thought we could have a little talk." Before he could take another step, a second door burst open. Marcello. His presence filled the room like thunder. He didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He just moved. Within seconds, Glint was on the floor, Marcello's arm pinning him. His voice was low, precise. "You're done. One more breath in her direction, and I will make sure you disappear into a courtroom so fast your bones won't know where they landed." Police arrived within minutes. Marcello had already called them when the security system sent an alert. The aftermath was quiet. The man was arrested, charges pressed, restraining orders filed. It was over, officially, but healing. That was still a process. That night, after everything settled, Marcello and Isla sat side by side on the back porch. The moon hung low. The trees swayed gently. "I thought I'd lost you," he said. "You didn't save me," she whispered. "We stood together. That's what changed everything." He reached for her hand. "You were so calm." "I was terrified," she said, smiling weakly. "But you were there. And more than that, I was ready to fight." Marcello nodded, emotion thick in his throat. Isla leaned against his shoulder. "The past is a chapter," Not the whole book. He repeated the words under his breath, like a vow. In facing their demons, his control, her fear, they hadn't just survived. They had grown. Together. Their love wasn't forged in fantasy. It had been tested by fire, by memory, by fear, and it had held. In the dark, they sat in silence, not broken, not scared, whole, and writing the next chapter, together. Spring returned with its soft breezes and golden light, but this time it wasn't just nature in bloom. The world around the Cannon estate had changed, subtly at first, then in ways no one could miss. The air no longer held the chill of solitude. The halls didn't echo with absence. Something warm had taken root, and it had nothing to do with wealth. It had everything to do with love. The past months had tested Marcelo and Isla more than either could have imagined, but in the aftermath of the danger, after the final confrontation, after the fear settled into history, they didn't return to how things had been. They moved forward. Marcelo, once the iron-willed titan who believed control equaled safety, found peace in surrender, not to chaos, but to trust. He no longer guarded every emotion like a vault. He began to feel out loud, and Isla, whose life had long revolved around quiet survival and dutiful care, started dreaming out loud too. She had always wanted to do more than just exist, to lift others the way she had been lifted. With Marcelo's support, but never direction, Isla launched the Lumen Foundation, a local organization aimed at giving disabled youth and trauma survivors access to art therapy, mentorship, and skill-building workshops. The idea wasn't about charity. It was about empowerment, about showing people they were more than their pain. The launch was quiet but beautiful. Marcelo was there in the back row, hands clasped, pride glowing from him in quiet waves as Isla stood at the podium and shared her story. I used to believe life was about staying out of the way, about not drawing too much attention, but kindness, the right kind, doesn't just save people, it awakens them. That's what I want to give back. She didn't name him in the speech. She didn't have to. 3 weeks later, Marcelo took Isla for a walk. They strolled the grounds of the estate, now humming with spring, the peach trees blooming, grass soft underfoot, wind gently ruffling her hair. The place no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like home. Marcelo paused by the old gazebo, the one no one had touched for years. But today it had been swept clean. Tiny lanterns hung from its beams, and in the center a small table with 2 cups of coffee, hers with extra honey, his plain. Isla blinked. "You did this?" He nodded, suddenly uncharacteristically quiet. His hand brushed against hers. "I used to think love had to be earned," he began. "Bought, or worse, hidden. I never knew it could be received." He pulled a small box from his coat. "I'm not asking you to complete me. I'm asking you to walk beside me." He opened the box. No crowd, no grandeur, just her and him. Her eyes filled with tears, not because it was flashy, but because it was real, grounded in everything they had survived and built together. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Marcelo." They married beneath the sun, beneath the music of birds and laughter, in a garden filled with every soul who had touched their journey. Isla wore a gown her mother stitched by hand, simple, elegant, glowing. Marcelo wore a tailored suit, but the part that drew most attention was his face, open, calm, even joyful. There were no grand speeches. Just a moment when the officiant paused, and Marcelo took Isla's hand and said, "I used to see nothing. Now I see everything that matters." Isla's smile was a sunrise. They kissed. The crowd applauded. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt entirely possible. Months passed. The foundation grew. Marcelo stepped back from daily operations of his empire, choosing instead to advise, mentor, and live with intention. No more walls, No more empty towers. He hosted small community dinners at the estate, inviting local artists, educators, and dreamers. The mansion filled with conversation and life, some evenings echoing with music, and others with the soft thrum of laughter. Isla spent her days split between the foundation, time with her mother, and simple joys, baking with the kitchen staff, painting in the garden, or sitting beside Marcello on the porch watching the stars. They built a greenhouse together. They danced at midnight with no music. They laughed over burnt toast and old books. This, they decided, was wealth. Not the titles, not the acres, the connection. Isla once said, "You didn't save me. You gave me the tools to save myself." Marcello later added, "You reminded me that strength isn't about being untouched. It's about choosing to heal and letting love help." Together, they didn't become perfect. They became whole. And that was always the point. Has this story touched your heart? If you've ever been inspired by someone's quiet strength or found healing in unexpected places, share your story in the comments below. Let others see the light in your journey. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, love, and the quiet power of kindness. Because sometimes the softest souls create the strongest love.